Don't you know that I'm loving you? In a Gala Vida, baby. Don't you know that I'll always be true? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting, adrenalizing Directors Club. I am your host, Jim Laskowski, and I am thrilled. I am honored to have two incredibly talented, hardworking guests that I consider to be inspirational figures in a lot of ways, and I always look forward to hearing their thoughts, especially when it comes to the man of the hour for this episode. With me sitting at a coffee shop diner are none other than the host of The Disconnected, among many other endeavors, Mr. Ryan Verrill. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Honored to have you back. And right across from him is the managing editor of RogerEbert.com and the president of the Chicago Film Critics Association, the one, the only, Brian Tallerico.
Hello, hello, hello.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I can't remember the last one I did. What was it? It was pre-COVID.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I want to say, it couldn't be that far back, but Sidney Lumet, I remember you were on for.
Oh, that's ages. I did Miyazaki after that, I thought.
Maybe.
I know I did Miyazaki, Lumet, and I think a third that I can't remember. But all of them are a very long time.
Oh, Park Chan-wook. You were on for Park Chan-wook.
Park Chan-wook.
Yeah.
Around Handmaiden time, maybe? That's got to be the most recent one.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. But we got a couple more for sure lined up in the future. One in particular that's just hard to do in light of the fact that we were going to record with somebody who unfortunately left us. It's with Sergio, and that's Terrence Davies, which I know we'll get around to at some point in the future. But man, I'm beyond excited. We have a filmmaker to dive in today that it's funny to talk about because as much as I love covering directors that I have yet to even touch upon this show, it's fun to go back and do a sequel or a Redux episode, especially considering this show goes way back to when we covered Michael Mann a decade ago.
All right, so when did you do Michael Mann last time?
2012?
In light of nothing specific, just got around to him.
Yeah, I mean...
you did early part of his career.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just eager to revisit Heat in particular because, strangely enough, the first time I saw it, I was like, it was all right. And then I watch it well over a decade later, and I'm like, oh my God, this is an absolute masterpiece. What was I thinking? And that
gets better with age, and I mean viewer age. Mm-hmm. As you get closer to the ages of its protagonists, I think it takes on new meaning and new light.
Yeah,
I'd also say cinema age too. I mean, compared to modern filmmaking, it is quite a different beast.
Yeah, well, that's true of all of his movies, even the recent ones.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a joy for me to do a Redux episode. I mean, I wish I could just do a lot of the directors that we covered pretty much in the early run. Even someone like David Lynch, there's a million other things I need to say that weren't covered on that one episode, and that definitely
do it again, man.
Oh, it's definitely
roll it back.
It's definitely going to happen again. There's going to be plenty of those, but yeah, like I mentioned, we focused quite a bit on Heat and The Insider for the first edition, and of course they can still come up on here. But I'm mostly interested in the overall trajectory, like what are his strengths early on, and how did he evolve? Maybe even where he fumbled a bit, at least for me, with one title. We'll get to that. I know. And I really do want, but I do want to expand on, obviously, like I think when we recorded that episode, maybe the most recent movie he had was Public Enemies, right? I think.
Had to have been, yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking about the latter part of his career in particular. But I always like to start out with the first discovery for each of you and just like kind of an overall general feeling of why you're a fan.
I was I had a visual appreciation for scenes in Chicago. I mean, just driving under a steel bridge on a rainy night, or the spaces, the way snow, kind of fell on the prairie outside Chicago. But I never put that together with doing anything in a visual medium. And then I took I was an English major, kind of caught in the anguish of not having any idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I took a film history course, myself and a couple of friends. And I remember walking down, this is the University of Wisconsin in Madison, walking down Bascom Hill at about 10 o'clock at night on a freezing, crystal clear night where you could see every star in the sky. And having just seen Pabst's Joyless Street, and it just suddenly struck me, you're going to make film. And it's one of the only 2 or 3 times in my life that you're kind of assaulted with total knowingness that this is, And that was it. And I decided I'm going to be a filmmaker. And I just looked around and I had no idea, how sound got on film. I looked around for graduate schools to go study filming. So
We'll start with Ryan. What was your first experience watching a Michael Mann film, if you recall, and what stood out to you about watching his work for the first time?
Funny enough, I believe it was as a late teenager doing a run-through of all of the Thomas Harris films and trying to catch all of them, even the ones that people were really looking down on at the time. And Manhunter, watching that first, I think kind of ruined me a little bit because that movie is just so stylish and different than the other ones that I was going to be seeing. And, the 1-2 knockout punch of that and then Silence is a really great start. And then the world changes after that. But Manhunter was a really great introduction. I was still at the part of my life where I wasn't really discovering filmmakers. I was still just discovering film itself. And it is only really since then that I've started to really appreciate the patterns and the recurring, shots that he seems to do, especially through things like dialogue that I just have fallen in love with. But Manhunter was a hell of a foundation for me.
Yeah, no, that's true for me as well. I mean, it was all about Manhunter initially early on, having seen Silence of the Lambs at kind of a young age. And both my dad and I were just huge fans of To Live and Die in L.A. So William Peterson was kind of our guy. And I still think Manhunter is his best performance. And even early on, in what could just be kind of like another serial killer procedural, it's clear that Mann has more on his mind than just making another genre exercise. Like these are portrayals of men like trapped by their own desires, which kind of ends up defining their place in the world. And what happens when those desires aren't fulfilled? How do they respond and react? And in the case of, Tom Noonan's character, he responds in murderous rage, but at the same time, William Peterson's detective can empathize too, and almost like understand why he acts out the way he does. And it's just a really interesting experience to start out early on because there were just like stylistic flourishes and touches in that film alone that I initially gravitated towards. And I think we're going to touch upon that even more throughout his entire filmography because he's really interested in the psychological dynamics between cop and criminal in particular. So Brian, how about you? What was the first Mann film you saw?
It's a good question. I think it was probably The Keep, because I went through a phase there when I was a teenager where I grabbed like every horror sci-fi thing I could find. So I must have watched The Keep early. It was The Keep or Manhunter, likelihood. Although it could have been Last of the Mohicans, which is, what's that, 91?
Yeah, or 92, I think.
Somewhere in there. I'm sure I saw that as well. And again, like Ryan, I knew who like Hitchcock and Kubrick were, but I wasn't necessarily picking out directors from films I was seeing when I was 14, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like the auteur thing wasn't really a thing until the mid 90s with the run of Heat and The Insider, still his 2 best films in my opinion. So like, that's when it became like, oh, this guy who's going to bring interesting themes back every time. His fascination with masculine labels, for lack of a better phrase, most often cop criminal, but also all kinds of other things and how we defy those labels. But yeah, and The Keep doesn't really fit that. But I think that's probably where it started. Well, The Keep is a messy production, which we don't really need to get into in so many ways. But I was just thinking, like, so what happened when I was young, I watched a ton of musicals, brief bio time, tons of musicals because my mom was a musical fan, and then I discovered horror. And I'm thinking during that horror phase, when I watched all the 80s slasher films, I probably watched The Keep and Manhunter. That's my short answer.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting contrast between musical and horror being the first.
I've seen Singing in the Rain more than any other film still, I believe, because my mom was such a musical fan, and it really instilled my love for movies in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, that's a great choice for sure. Yeah. I mean, I want to see Michael Mann do a musical horror film now. That's what I think should happen at some point.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Give him the Halloween franchise. Let's get nuts.
Oh, gosh.
For sure. Yeah. Probably do a better job than David Gordon Green did. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, Chicago born and raised, Michael Mann.
That's right.
Yeah, and he was initially just majoring in English Lit at University of Wisconsin. Then he went to a screening of G.W. Papp's The Joyless Street, and of course discovering things like Dr. Strangelove and German Expressionism and silent cinema, of course. But yeah, I mean, he was initially, I guess, looked at film from a visual perspective, and plot was kind of like secondary to character and mood. But I know he got his feet wet, obviously, by working in television, especially in the 70s. And I even just recently discovered he wrote a draft of a film that I love, Straight Time, from 1978. I had no idea about that until recently. I think initially it was going to be, his script and Dustin Hoffman directing it. But that all changed. Yeah. But, he won a lot of awards and acclaim for The Jericho Mile, a TV movie that was shot at Folsom Prison that I've yet to uncover, but I'm going to definitely seek that one out because that sort of laid the foundation for what was to come with his feature directorial debut that, in my mind, is still in the upper tier of Mann's work for me. And that, of course, is Thief.
I'm a thief! You want to put down contract scores all over the country? Working directly for me?
I am self-employed.
I'll make you a millionaire in 4 months. So what do you say, Frank?
They gotta be big scores, they gotta be fast. 1, 2 tops.
You don't know from one day to the next whether you're going to be killed, go home, or get busted.
Look, I have run out of time. So I'm just asking you to be with me. Got a problem? I go to work for you, I'm pulling a lot of exposure.
Are they in the walls? I mean, can they hear everything we say all the time?
Look, we your new partners. We in for 10 points.
Our end goes with the territory. They don't run me, and you don't run me. I want my end.
From 1981. Wow. I keep going back to this movie and just going, damn, this is everything I love right here. It's certainly even just the way this movie starts. I'm sure a lot of people talked about this film in particular after seeing Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive.
Yes.
But a lot of people were citing The Driver, and I was kind of like, I'm seeing more Thief. And rewatching again, the whole opening is pretty much just the opening of Drive practically. But no, there's just something I respond to a lot with his early work. It's kind of less refined and kind of gritty and raw, and I just love, like I mentioned earlier, existential films about criminals that just struggle to move forward while realizing they're kind of defined by the fact that they're just damn good at being a criminal, which comes up time and time again, and particularly in Heat. But I think two of my favorite moments in all of Mann's films involve sitting down for coffee in a diner.
Yeah, right.
And it's just two people talking, and here we get that with Khan and Tuesday Weld. That sort of makes this more, it makes it a whole lot more than just another heist thriller, involving the mob. So, I mean, he cares about the psychology and the backstory of the characters without making it necessarily expositional. It really allows us to get inside the character's psyche in a way that, he does time and time again. And not to mention the fact that this is just a really cool movie, and one of the best Chicago films ever made, and Tangerine Dream score. It just lays the groundwork in such an assured way that it feels more like a confident artistic statement than this is just my debut here. It really feels like this is, Mann at the top of his game, even early on, at least for me. But what do you guys think? Brian, what are your thoughts on Thief?
I love Thief. I love Thief for all the reasons you said. I mean, but I also think that you talk about the psychology and stuff, but I also just think Thief works as a visual statement. The way he uses light. I mean, you talked about Drive. When I think of Drive, I think of characters lit by dashboard lights. And Thief has that same kind of, we're going to light you by the light around you at night. I think of parking lot lights. I think of dashboard lights, diner lights. Do you know what I mean? There's like this stylish but natural lighting sensibility to it that's just gorgeous and mesmerizing, and I love it. I think Thief is a film you could watch with the sound off and still thoroughly appreciate. And maybe we'll get into it on a bigger picture. I also think of Mann as a wonderful person when it comes to using a wonderful filmmaker when it comes to using setting. Like you said, it's a great Chicago movie. Heat is a great LA movie. Miami Vice is a great Miami movie. Sorry, we'll get there. He just knows how to bring the character of the place he's setting his film to life in ways that other filmmakers often ignore. So I think of that when I think of Thief, because you're right, it's a Chicago movie, and Heat's an LA movie. And Miami Vice, of course, is a Miami movie. And even Public Enemies is a Chicago movie.
Sure, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so I think of, you're right. The fact that Thief was first is insane, because it's my third in his filmography for me. Like, I love it. I adore it. I think it's a great group. And one of Kahn's best performances too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just, again, going back to this and seeing the supporting cast, like even, Robert Prosky, who was like, I think this was his, Farina, like everybody in here is fantastic. So Ryan, what do you think of Thief?
I mean, we're all gushing. I can't say much different. This movie starts incredible, even in a, I don't know, almost small scale, which I miss a lot with modern movies. It seems like everything that we're talking about nowadays is the world is ending or nothing. Those are the only two possibilities. Right. And this movie is a lot of small problems that are big in somebody's life, and that is inherently more relatable. And something about I mean, like the sheer simplicity of Kahn's character is just, I could totally see myself in his shoes and why he's making the decisions he's making. But the sure-footedness of a brand new director to be doing that with somebody like James Caan in this movie is wild beyond belief. I cannot fathom anybody else making this as their first movie. It makes zero sense.
Yeah, and like his sort of just toughness, I guess, for lack of a better word, isn't, compromised by his past. It's kind of informed by it. Like, he has this steely bravado that, you can sort of look at as a defense mechanism, but I don't know. There's just something about, like, even just learning about what happened to him in prison that adds a whole other extra layer of characterization that you wouldn't get, like, in a normal genre film, right? I think once we learn, like, I am, the boss of my own life, and his declaration of that, I think it's just, again, like you're talking about being relatable, Ryan. I get where this character is coming from, even though I'm not a criminal per se, and I'm certainly not a thief in the traditional sense, I guess you could say, or in the way that he is in this film. But I think overall, it's just, a really strong statement in so many ways that I kind of go back and go, wow. And even just like, just James Belushi, right?
Yeah, right.
The camaraderie.
Last good thing he did.
You're probably right.
And also Tangerine Dream. Let's talk about how great Tangerine Dream is.
Oh, God, yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite scores, and for sure, I mean, I think they only did Sorcerer right before this, right? And then this was their second score?
Yes. They had to keep after this.
Oh, right, yeah. But no, I mean, like, he initially wanted to use Chicago Blues to be the foundation for the score and everything, but there was something about Tangerine Dream that sort of added a whole other layer and level to what everything taking place, sort of giving it this otherworldly quality. And he even said
another element that Refn stole.
Sure.
Refn stole the bit.
Oh, for sure.
Like, the music is so inspired.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like he even said that it's interesting that Tangerine Dream's roots were actually with 12-bar blues. They just chose synthesizers and keyboards instead of guitars, which is really interesting. I wouldn't have correlated blues with Tangerine Dream until I heard him talk about it. But yeah, no, it all makes sense. It all comes together beautifully throughout, and a great final climax and a great final shot. It's just, yeah, everything. I love everything about this movie. And we did touch upon Manhunter really quickly, and I know we did briefly talk about it last time, but it's also another, like I mentioned, landmark.
We're just skipping the Keep.
I was about to say, what happened in the middle?
Oh, geez.
So briefly, he went and made the Keep. It was a disaster. They Paramount gave him a lot of money, didn't know what to do with it, and then asked him to cut it. And Tangerine Dream did a great score for it. And there are like alternate versions out there that are supposed to be kind of cool, but no one's ever seen them. All right, we can move on. That's fine.
Well, I know there's like it was hacked to bits, right? And I think I mean, I'd be curious to see. Geez, surprise, surprise! A director's cut from Michael Mann.
Well, they claim that like a lot of the footage is gone, like the test screening footage. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, hold on, I'm looking this up. Mann's original cut ran 210 minutes.
Oh my god,
which is amazing. But who doesn't want to see that? I would pay a significant amount of money to see that.
That is so
apparently
much.
Fans are still petitioning for it, so maybe there's footage out there. Let's get a GoFundMe together for the Keep director's cut. Release the Keep cut, whatever that dumb thing we need to do. But anyway, the Keep was a mess. We don't have to spend too much time on it, and it bombed, historically bombed.
Yeah, I keep waiting for like a better pristine. Because like the one I found was like kind of crappy quality, and then I was very tired.
It's not on Blu-ray. It's not on Blu-ray at all.
Yeah. I mean,
well, the rumors are we might be hearing more about that before the end of the year.
Yeah,
I
keep
don't tease me.
I keep hearing.
Are you serious? like a director's cut or just a Blu-ray?
I mean, we don't know any details yet, but the rumors are we are possibly seeing that either by the end of the year or early next year.
Okay. All right.
Well, we will just
let's reunite in a year to talk about the Keep director's cut.
I was going to say we could just do a bonus. We'll just do a bonus episode of that, especially if it's the director's cut. I'd be very curious.
Jim, when is this episode going up?
Probably next week. So right before Thanksgiving, I'm thinking. Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk after, gentlemen.
Wow. Interesting.
All right. Moving on.
To Manhunter. Of course, I'm starting this episode with Iron Butterfly. You know, got to.
Have to.
But yeah, no, I mean, Will Graham sort of became, like I mentioned, a template for man protagonists in general. I mean,
yes,
these men tend to be amazing at their particular career of choice, yet they're so consumed by it that it like causes trauma at the same time. And I often think of like this is a movie that I really became, even more aware of production design and even sometimes the architecture, because it's able to like externalize the internal moods of the protagonists and thinking of the house towards the end, and just you really become aware of like the geography of every room, and certainly little touches throughout that you wouldn't get a scene like the one with the tiger in a film like this. And I think that adds a whole other extra layer of, again, like I mentioned earlier, characterization, but it's just another showcase for all his strengths at really another early stage of his career, and how he's driven to understand psychosis while also just being a damn good procedural. And, again, an amazing cast showing up again, Farina here, and even Chris Elliott shows up at one point. When every time I go back to this, I'm like, oh, that's Chris Elliott in the interrogation room. So yeah, no, it's incredible. I still love going back to this one, and God, Brian Cox, what can you say, right? Brian, Manhunter, love it.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's one of his best and one of the best of its era. The fact that Demi topped it, in my opinion, is insane because it's so good. Mm-hmm. But those two movies as a double feature, and then you can skip straight ahead to the Hannibal TV series and be totally happy. It's just really, it's remarkable. Like everything you said, it's remarkable stuff. It's the Nietzsche quote, "You stare into the abyss stares into you." And that kind of comes back to his work over and over and over again. Although Harris gets a little credit for that.
Oh, sure.
That's the Will Grant character in the book to a certain extent. But Mann proved to be the perfect channel for that story and for that storytelling. And the fact that Brett Ratner thought it needed to be remade in any way, shape, or form is insane. Anyway.
Yeah. Ryan, we mentioned Manhunter as your first experience, so I'm assuming you're still a fan.
Still a fan. My big thing going back through these in modern times, I am in love with just how dirty this movie feels. When you watch it close to Silence of the Lambs, that other movie feels so pristine compared to this. And every scene of this just feels like if you're walking down the street, it will stick to you because of that. Even, obviously one of the most famous scenes from this is the wheelchair scene, but it is done in such a way that it uniquely sticks to you after this film. You afterwards feel like it was burning right in front of you. The colors are captured differently than you see in other movies. And there's something about the way that he filmed this that it just lingers, like it weighs heavily compared to everything else in the series, which honestly, that shouldn't be the case. Some of these other movies are like more brutal, a little more, not always realistic, but sometimes realistic. And, even with Anthony Hopkins giving literally one of the best villain performances of all time, this movie sticks to me more than Silence of the Lambs.
I can see that. It's sweatier. His movies are always sweatier.
Exactly.
You can feel they're more tactile than Demi's or a lot of other filmmakers. You can touch them, you can feel them, you can sense them, and that adds to the tension. And it's something that's gone in modern film so much. You don't see characters sweat in modern movies because they've been airbrushed to death. But enough of that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too. Grimy and kind of icky at times, and it's just, and you really feel like, I mean, as much as the wheelchair, the tiger scene, of course, the final shootout and everything. Just the scene of William Peterson going into that room with the tape recorder. That really just really unnerves me to no end. And again, just capturing how traumatizing it must be for any detective to have to go and think on that level. And just, he really gets to the core of that experience in a way that really does stay with you. These are two perfect, Silence of the Lambs and this, that's just as good as it gets for sure. So, after, a couple of his films, bombed in a row, sadly, Manhunter wasn't a hit. He took a 6-year gap and returned to the big screen with an adaptation of the James Fenimore Cooper Last of the Mohicans novel. And it received mostly good reviews and was kind of a hit, but it's just not something especially if you think of his early work, it's not something you would think Michael Mann's going to do this type of story, right? But he's going out of his crime comfort zone in mostly a good way. I mean, I didn't go back to this one for this episode, but I went back, a couple of years ago or so, and I always go, I really, really like this movie quite a bit. I just don't get caught up as emotionally in the whole story as I would assume I would. But I just love everything about it on a technical level and the performances. And anytime there's a battle or an action sequence, I've always been on the side that this is a very good film, but not upper tier, despite appreciating a lot about it. Ryan, what do you think of Last of the Mohicans?
Yeah, I appreciate this movie more than I like it. I think this was my first Daniel Day-Lewis movie, which...
Yeah, mine too, actually.
Even then, I could appreciate that this person was next level compared to the other things that I was used to seeing on the screen. But other than that, this is... I also was just not the right age to see this when I saw it. It was popular at a time that... I was... maybe a young teenager when I saw this, because this had to have been right after Manhunter that I saw this, I would bet. And I don't know, it's a good movie. It's well made, but really I don't take a lot away from this. And it could just be, to me, this doesn't feel like a Michael Mann movie. This feels like I need to get back in there after a couple failures, bring people back to my side before I hit them again. And that's fine. Sometimes you got to do that. However, just didn't jive with me.
Yeah, it could be like a case of one for them,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
nothing wrong with that at all, and it's entertaining. It's just, again, it doesn't resonate as strongly with me. Brian, how do you feel about it?
I don't know if I can go with the one for them argument. I think the book really interested him as a study of old-fashioned masculine adventure storytelling. I do think it's good. Like I said, it's good, robust adventure storytelling, which is something. There's an old-fashioned sensibility to the way he looks at gender, especially that I think fits with this. I generally agree with what you guys say in that it's second-tier man, but it's like first-tier blockbuster filmmaking as far as I'm concerned. Like for me, as we might get into as we get going here, Minor Man is still major filmmaking. So I still enjoy this movie, even if it's in the bottom half of his filmography for me.
Yeah, no, I can see that completely. Yeah, for sure. I just, again, like, certainly by the end, I'm like, oh, I enjoyed that, but it just, certainly didn't connect with me on a deep, emotional, profound level either, which doesn't have to happen.
I hate to be the old man on the soapbox who's exhausted by CGI, but man, if this movie came out today, it would be probably my top 10.
Yeah.
Like in terms of blockbuster action filmmaking that just doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, we can look at it as minor blip in his existence, but I would kill to watch this movie this weekend in a theater.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. So we spent the majority of the last Michael Mann episode on both Heat and The Insider, and suffice to say, if you go back and listen to that, they remain to this day my favorites of his entire filmography. Like I think you said, Brian, but I mean, especially Heat. It's just a true blue masterpiece and like kind of a summation of everything he does so incredibly well. I watched the 4K of this and just kind of like went, man, there is nothing I would change about this movie. Like some people made the argument, oh, it's too long, or I can't. Again, like I know that you I think you even did a whole review for the book, right? The sequel that
I read the book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm curious to just hear you go off for a bit on Heat, Brian. I mean, just because we haven't heard your feelings on it.
I wouldn't take a frame out of this movie. Heat is one of the great examples of a movie where I firmly believe that the characters exist before and after they walk into frame. Like even the minor beats, the minor characters feel fully lived in, fully existing in this world. You are a visitor in this world. You're going to watch what happens and then you're going to leave again. None of it feels, and yet it is also so calibrated. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like the best Mann films walk that line between feeling totally organic, but then you pause for a minute and go, no, it can't be. Like it's not organic. It's just the sensibility that he can bring to his filmmaking. And of course, there's the convergence of two of the best actors of their generation. He knew exactly what he was doing when he cast those two. In Pacino and De Niro and pitting them against each other and what that would mean. And they're both so good in this movie. I watched it again before I read the book. And you remember it like for its big set pieces and for its technical prowess. And like I said, it's organic, raw sweatiness, like Ryan said earlier. But this time I really appreciated, I think we underestimate Mann's ability with performers. Like he's drawing out. These are two of De Niro and Pacino's best performances. You said William Peterson's best performance. I would argue Russell Crowe's best performance in The Insider. I think Depp is amazing in Public Enemies. I think Jamie Foxx has never been better than he is in Collateral. Will Smith has never been better than he is in Ali. So my point is that like we look at him for all these technical thematic issues, but he's also an incredible director of actors. Like he really knows how to bring out the inherent skill sets of these people and use them to their greatest advantage, which is a skill. He knows what to do with the people on screen in ways that other directors don't. And I think, again, we've talked about Heat so much. You did a whole other podcast on it. But I would like to remind people that De Niro and Pacino rule in this movie, as do all the supporting performers too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like I mentioned early on, it just doesn't get better than that coffee shop diner moment.
Even the minor beats, though, like De Niro has a few beats with Margulies that are phenomenal. Like there's just a lot of little small choices that the two performers make because I think actors get invigorated by working with Mann. They sense an artist who's passionate about what he does, sometimes to a fault, maybe later in his career, we'll get there. But like Mann never phones it in. And so the actors in front of his camera don't phone it in either. There's not a phoned in performance in a Michael Mann movie. Not a single one. no matter what you want to say about some of the lesser ones, which we might get to, everyone's given their all here. And when you get people like Pacino and De Niro giving their all, you get heat.
Yeah. And man, you can tell, I mean, his attention to detail, the specificity, a word I always have trouble saying. But I would like, I've read like he like goes so far, like he's obsessed. He goes so far as to like spend, hours and hours trying to pick the perfect Hawaiian shirt for James Belushi's character in Thief. I mean, you and I'm sure the actors see that.
To make movies.
Yeah.
It takes him forever because he's such a perfectionist. It's why he's made so few in such a long career.
Yeah, and clearly you take after, someone like Kubrick, you might, I don't know if he does as many takes necessarily, but yeah, it's just, he really cares. And I'm sure the actors pick up on that and they get as invested as he is in the material for sure. Yeah. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Heat? Not to be confused with the Burt Reynolds movie, of course.
I mean, what's funny is I always use one word to describe heat, and that is kinetic. I always look at this as like genuinely the scientific definition of the word kinetic, because leading into this, there is just truly so much potential energy. These actors on multiple highs leading into this performance. Mann, perhaps bottled up a little bit compared to what he wanted to do. Started out with something like Thief, had a couple that were different, and now we're back and coming into something that maybe seems a little more up his alley. So he was ready to go. And then the confluence of all of these performances, and even like smaller roles in this film that we've never mentioned so far. I mean, Hank Azaria, Ashley Judd, Henry Rollins, freaking Danny Trejo is in this, John Voight, like everybody all coming together at that exact perfect time to have literally an explosion of kinetic energy that just shows up on screen in a way that feels like we were building to this for years, and thankfully it came out exactly as he had planned. And that's the thing. He's known for being a planner. He's known for somebody that is going to put proper preparation to get the best performance that he possibly can. And this, I think, is potentially the best way that we see that on screen.
Yeah, and even you mentioned that great supporting cast. Even someone like Dennis Haysbert, who has a small role, right? But boy, just like that tiny little arc, and being able to sort of relate to having a shitty boss, and just wanting to get out of that situation, even if it means going back to doing something you don't want to do. I think, again, grounding just a small minor supporting character in this really just shows you that he cares about every single component. It's not like, let's just throw in this character and let it happen. And there's really an emotional weight to what happens to him, and it's tragic too. And I like, and this is certainly I always say like, usually my favorite film of a director, it has to really impact me emotionally, and it has to make me cry to that extent. And this is definitely a case of that, with a couple of moments. I mean, I get really, kind of overwhelmed by that scene, because you mentioned Ashley Judd with her on the balcony, and just like, and nothing is said, right? So I think that moment is really, really heartbreaking and beautifully done in every way. And of course, just the final moment. It just, I even just thinking about it, just him taking his hand, really, it's something that you never would expect to really just affect you that deeply. And it's it's a testament, like Brian, what you were saying, to those actors and the performances they give here, that you care that much about both of them equally.
And how much he knows how to use them. Val Kilmer, too.
Sure.
Like, he finds people at the right place in their career and goes, this is what you should be doing. Like, this works for you. Like, the way he used Jamie Foxx multiple times. He arguably misjudged Chris Hemsworth, but we'll probably get there. But just the way he uses Kilmer, like you said, all the supporting parts, but I want to give love to Kilmer, too. He's phenomenal. In this movie.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. So Ryan, why don't you take the Insider a bit? Because again, we expanded on that one quite extensively, just like the many strengths of that particular film. just sort of like talk about your thoughts on that real quick, and then Brian can also share.
Understated is probably the best way that I think about this one. I've not honestly, I did not rewatch this for this, but this is one that I probably should. It has been quite some time. I remember this one really hanging over me for a while as well, and primarily just the dialogue in this movie is so grounded and intentional. That's one thing that I feel like I'm missing a lot nowadays. We get so much, just random context that does not need to be here. And just like we said earlier, I think it was Brian saying about Heat, I wouldn't take a single frame out. This movie still feels like that to me. I am very happy with this entire movie. Shot great, incredible performances. Shout out Philip Baker Hall, who always elevates every single film he's in because he's so goddamn magnetic. I mean, again, perfect cast. Christopher Plummer. Like, there's so much to say about this movie. Every single one of these, I feel like we could have a full hour and a half conversation because they're just so unique. And again, that confluence of just this had to be the time this was made. And the fact that he's pulled that off so many times in his career shows you that it's just not a fluke. He absolutely knows what he's doing.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think this was 99, right? That's an incredible year. And still yet this stands out so strongly in so many ways. And a lot of it is because of the performances, but also just its depiction of journalism. I love movies about journalism, period. So,
same.
I think that element alone, and he's telling a true story here, but doing it in a way that's not biopicky or conventional. It's just telling a straightforward story, but just in a way that elevates it because Mann does it in a very compelling way throughout. And yeah, I just I always think about how I've never was like the biggest Russell Crowe guy in general. And not that I disliked him, I just never he never really connected with me as an actor until this movie. And then suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I want to see him in everything because of this performance. And yeah.
Whoa. Yeah. Did you see LA Confidential?
Oh yeah, that's true. No, he's good at that. He's good.
Yeah. LA Confidential is a bolt of lightning performance where you're like, okay, that's the guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then Romper Stomper was sort of his big breakout, right?
Sure. But LA Confidential is that's going to be the dude. But then what's so interesting about this performance to me, sorry to cut in there before I got.
No. Go. I've said enough last time.
Is how different it is from LA Confidential. This is like Russell Crowe can do more than the brute part, for lack of a better phrase. Like, this is a very intellectual, fascinating performance. I'm going to do this a lot, this podcast, as I do on every podcast, because I'm an old man now. It's one of those, I wish there were more movies like this nowadays with adults talking about serious stuff, doing adult things.
Yes, please.
We just don't get them as often as we used to. And in many ways, it's Mann's most acclaimed film. I mean, it's his only Best Picture nominee. It got 7 nominations at the Oscars that year. It's his biggest critical darling until people went back and realized they got Heat wrong. I mean, he got no Oscar nominations, which is legitimately insane.
No kidding.
The Insider got 7, so they kind of made up for lost time. And not like that's a big thing, but you know what I mean. Like, this was the one where everyone was like, "Oh, Michael Mann matters. These actors matter. This story matters." It was a perfect confluence of events for him in the film.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Bruce McGill, he shows up a lot in Mann's films. God, he's explosive in this.
He's
movie.
Great here. So good here.
Yeah.
And I love how much Mann reuses people over and over again.
Yeah, most definitely. So let's talk about the opening of Ali.
Okay.
Oh my God, is it good? That sequence, that whole opening, the Sam Cooke medley. My God, I get goosebumps watching just how this film opens. It's, and yet again, biopics don't always click with me in terms of let's just tell an overall general story and have it go from point A to point B to point C. But again, Mann doesn't necessarily do that in every case. And I think, and I think that's what makes it great to watch, even once we get to Ferrari. I think your expectations of like, oh, we're going to tell this true story about this guy and all his accomplishments, and we're going to see it all and see his life and see how it plays out. But, just focusing on this particular moment in time is the way to go when you're telling a story about somebody's life. And I think most of us who get kind of inundated with biopics, especially around award season, often feel that way. Like, this is the right way to tell this kind of story. He doesn't play it safe, in other words. And this shows the flaws of Ali, while also measuring his significance and making sure everybody involved gets their due. And again, an incredible supporting cast. But really, for me, like, I kind of go, man, I just love this opening so much that I want that energy to just be throughout the entire film. But obviously that would be kind of crazy and exhausting. But no, like, he did incredible things. The boxing, sequences, like cameras were attached to people's heads, and there was a great deal of steady cam and just great handheld work to sort of convey the sensation of being in the ring or being in the moment. And yeah, no, I really like Ali quite a lot. It's funny too, because like part of me wishes this could have been a miniseries. Like, I wish he could have done the HBO Max version of this, because there's just so much ground to cover. That's what I thought rewatching it this time. But at the same time, like, God, what an incredible performance from Will Smith that carries this entire film too. So there's a lot to appreciate about this for sure. Brian, do you love Ali?
I do not.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's just like the strengths at least override some of the weaker elements for me.
Sure. I think part of the problem with Ali was that it came relatively short on the heels of When We Were Kings, which is one of the best documentaries ever made.
Yes.
And I really think telling Ali's story on film is almost an impossible challenge to overcome. I think he's such a vibrant, important figure of the 20th century that I'm not sure, like you said, a miniseries maybe, although as a TV critic too, I'm exhausted by bio miniseries. If you think biopics are bad, bio miniseries are usually worse. I like elements of Ali, and to get this out there are no bad Michael Mann films, in my opinion. The spoiler for the rest of this podcast. So to say that this is his worst movie is still faint praise. I don't hate it. I just don't think he fully gets a grip on what it should be or what he even intended it to be. Ebert notoriously gave it 2 stars and said it felt more like a eulogy than a celebration. And I kind of agree with that. It lacks the vibrancy of Ali's life, despite how good Will Smith is in it, and Jamie Foxx, and how much we wish, and Voight, how much we wish like Smith could do interesting stuff like this again. I do, at least.
Yeah.
And again, there are elements of it that I like. The technical proficiency can't be denied, but there's a tonal aspect of it that I can't wrap my brain around as to what he's going for. Although, to be fair, I don't think I've seen it in 12 years or so. I didn't rewatch it for this. I only did the post-Collateral stuff for this. So those are my old opinions that might have changed now that I'm an older man. I'll revisit it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Again, like I almost felt that way too when I first saw it, but I just kind of on a whim, I was like, I haven't seen this in so long, and I just remember how, again, like I'll say this for the third time, that opening really captures so much.
I've got a director's cut Blu-ray around here somewhere that I should dig out and watch, and I haven't done.
What, another director's cut? That's very strange.
He tweaked it a few years ago. He tweaks everything. No, he tweaked it a few years ago for Blu-ray.
Yeah, him and Ridley Scott, they're just like constantly going back and redoing everything.
Yeah, 2017. He actually, I think, like many of his director's cut, it's shorter.
Oh,
believe it or not. Yeah, he tightened it. The Black Hat, I think, is shorter too. Like a lot of his are actually tighter. He cuts things out and uses alternate takes. I think that's the case with Ali.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ryan, how about you?
I think I like this more than both of you. I tend to, kind of like you said, Jim, about biopics. I kind of tend to feel the same way about sports movies. They just roll past me as, I don't know, cheesy most of the time. Something that it's the same story told 800 different ways, and I don't enjoy 795 of those. And not that they're bad movies. I just don't get the feeling. And what's interesting is this is the first movie in his filmography that I feel like it goes from relatable characters to I feel like I'm in the room, which is a nice change for me for this one. And to be honest, I've always felt for this, I almost think this was just made too early. And I do get the whole eulogy versus celebration thing, but it was also very close to the time of his passing when more people knew his legacy. If this was made in, I don't know, 2015, where most, I probably shouldn't generalize, but I guarantee you a lot of younger people have no idea who this is. If we're telling this important story about him, it might be a little more meaningful when they don't have the memories of, him holding the Olympic torch in '96 in Atlanta and stuff like that. So
Ali didn't pass until 16, but you mean his leaving
the legacy
here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got 5 stops to make.
What's your name?
Max.
Max. I'm Vincent.
I'll meet you in the alley behind the building.
Oh no! What the hell? You killed him.
Red light, Max.
Hold on.
Man, you were gonna drive me around tonight and never be the wiser, but we're into plan B. Now we gotta make the best of it. Improvise, adapt to the environment. Whatever, man, we gotta roll with it.
You just met him once and you kill him like that?
But I should only kill people after I get to know them?
I'm not up for this.
So yeah, after Ali, he returned to the streets of LA with a really stellar hitman drama, Collateral, which is one of his most fun, just pure, kind of escapist entertainment genre exercises. That is just great to go back to for the performances, even if it's not, again, profound or anything, or, thematically resonant as a lot of his other work, like Heat and The Insider in particular. It's just a really great time. And his first foray into digital video and this new aesthetic, which doesn't always work for a lot of people. And, we'll get to that soon, I'm sure. Personally, I actually really like it here. There's this fluidity of motion that you can easily notice as being completely different than when you shoot on film. And it creates this sense of immediacy and tension, like you're in that cab with these characters, or just, in that club. It's there's just something about, because every now and then when you do that approach or do the shaky cam thing, I think it's forced, but here it works so well. And maybe the last act for me, kind of wraps things up in a way. It's a little convenient, or just tying it all into the Jada Pinkett Smith character. It was kind of predictable, but I just thoroughly enjoy everything else, especially when it's just Cruise and Fox in that cab, claustrophobia, like you wouldn't believe, and just the tension going on. And even when Fox has to basically impersonate him, that whole sequence is really remarkable too. So yeah, I love Collateral. I keep going back to this and going, this is just one of the more fun man movies, So Brian, what do you think of Collateral?
Everything you said. Yeah, I think the immediacy of the digital camera work is phenomenal. I think, like I was saying about finding performers at the right time, he taps into something in Cruise that other filmmakers haven't been able to do, or he wasn't willing to do. It's one of Tom Cruise's best performances, in my opinion, and Jamie Foxx, too. I love Jamie Foxx. Don't get me started. I think he's one of the most underrated performers of his generation, and I think he's great here. It's like you said, there's a arguable sense that it's lacking deeper subtext, right? But it's just, in a sense, that it's almost more like Mohicans in that I'm just going to make a really robust piece of adult filmmaking. I'm going to make a movie for adults by an adult that will entertain you. And I'm not going to pander or treat you like an idiot or crowd my thing with unnecessary details and try to make it the lowest common denominator. I'm just going to make a movie that I find thoroughly entertaining, and hopefully you will too. I get the sense that that's what he did with Collateral. He wanted to have fun. He wanted to have a good time. He knew how enjoyable that movie could be. In many ways, it's his most crowd-pleasing film. It's probably that or Mohicans. And in that sense, I love it. I loved it then and I love it now. I think it's great.
Yeah, just keep it simple. I think that's what he did here, and I appreciate that. It's like kind of going back to his roots with Thief to some degree. Making it more just about two people or just one person, or just like certainly just making it simplified, like I said.
Yeah, but it's got more adrenaline than that.
Yeah.
It's not as talky as Thief.
That's true.
It's more like, all right, it's his most like roller coastery of a movie in a lot of ways. I think in every way.
Yeah. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
I am the crowd and I am pleased. This movie is great through and through. I love how aspirational it is. There's so much about this that is, Fox just trying to visualize his future, and the humor that comes throughout this movie always gets to me. The random shots back of the broken glass after being thrown from the second floor. Jamie Foxx impersonating in that scene is so just, I don't know. It's so perfect and out of character for somebody that grew up watching Jamie Foxx do everything else except for this. It was so nice to see this. He being Mann in this is just doing his job, is what it feels like. And what I love is that's what the movie feels like too. We're talking about it being maybe somewhat surface level, but Tom Cruise knows he's got a job and he's just kind of doing his job. Jamie Foxx is in a bad situation and he just kind of has to deal with it. And the movie does end up a little tidy, but I've never looked at that as a downside. I think it makes it, I don't know, again, just that perfect confluence of everything happens all at once that's perfect, and happens in the storyline too. I've always appreciated this one, and the whole DV cam thing, or not DV cam, the digital video, I tend to understand that it does make it give this, this unique perspective. I do kind of wish it could have looked a little bit better, and we could do something post the production to be able to restore it to better heights, because a lot of people that don't like the visual aspect of this are just missing a great movie, and I wish that wasn't holding it back.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really stylized choice that makes it very highly kind of like saturated in a way where, like, we'll get to a different movie where my memory of it was like, oh my gosh, this looks like it was shot on like a Sony Handycam that you would get at Best Buy or something, but that's not the case. I don't know if it's just like, revisiting these movies on Blu-ray or something where it was just kind of like, the transfers make this actually look pretty great. I don't know if
you've also seen 20 years of digital filmmaking.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah,
it felt different at the time.
Absolutely. And certainly we always bring up how great he is at casting here. Like I went, going back to this and seeing, I had completely forgot Javier Bardem shows up in this movie. Oh, there's Mark Ruffalo. Oh, there's Peter Berg. So, I mean, again, just his strength with, getting the right cast, just to back up the story. And, one can make the argument, it's like, oh, the movie is at its best when it's just the Fox and Cruise show, but I still think it's cool to watch, Ruffalo and Peter Berg play cops trying to figure things out too. So it's all good for me. Oh, so
yeah, baby, let's go. Let's do it.
I knew this. I knew it. I knew this was going to happen. And when I go on Letterboxd and see 5 stars, I feel like I need to take a drink or take an edible, because I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? What happened? What's wrong with me? Miami Vice. Oh, wow. What a movie that everybody's gone back to and has a very different opinion on it.
I gave it an A at UGO in 2006. Just want to get that on the record. It's a review you can't find right now, but I am not a Miami Vice come lately. I'm just going to put that out there.
And I really do kind of regret not seeing this on the big screen. They showed it at the Music Box like within the past few months or something, and I was just like, damn it, I should have gone and seen it there, and then maybe something would have happened where I would click with me more. I don't know, but Yeah, it's just two cops going undercover, man. I mean, that's the gist of this plot. And I'm going to be on the outside looking in because, again, like I think everything before Miami Vice, I can at least enjoy on a basic level of this entertained me, this engaged me, this, affected me somehow. This is the only one really in his filmography I don't completely vibe with. And yet I know it starts out really strong. I love the opening in the club. I love the initial confrontation and shootout involving what's his name who passed away? Otis I just think of him as Otis from Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, who's bald in this. Gunning down some cops in a car. The way that is shot, I was just like, oh my God, maybe I was wrong. But after that, I don't know what it is. I kind of tune out and become kind of bored. I mean, I know this is kind of like mostly about vibes and like a tone poem, right? Like it's not driven by narrative, and it's just strange how I have like kind of very little investment in these characters to where I don't know. I don't think Verrill and Fox are all that good in this per se. But I mean, again, the supporting cast stands out. I really like John Ortiz. I think he's great.
Always great.
Yeah. But the love story, no, doesn't work for me. Even just the final confrontation, I don't know. It just, I kind of shrug this movie off. And yet I'm not saying it's a bad movie because, I mean, I even think when it first came out, some people did think it was terrible, but I'm just mostly in the middle. And
some people still think it's terrible, Jim.
Yeah, I know. And
tons of people do.
There's things about it I really like I mentioned. I just kind of I find it to be a little bit of a slog, mostly in the middle. And I kind of go, I'm basically Tom Hanks raising his hand in big saying, I don't get it. This is the one time where I can say, not for me, but I want to hear what both of you have to say, because again, I'm just curious about how people are responding to this movie so strongly and going back and saying, this is actually a masterpiece. So I want to hear from either of you. You choose. Whoever goes first this time.
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I feel like I'm going first a lot, but I'll take this one. You mentioned it. It's vibes. It's the vibes of that opening scene and how much it carries you through the film, or in your case, does not. I don't give a damn about the plot of this movie. And I don't think Mann does either. I don't think he really wants you to get too invested in the machinations of what's happening. He wants you to experience it. He wants you to be on the boat going from Miami to Havana and feel the wind in your hair and the moment. It's a moment to moment film for me. And that kind of filmmaking doesn't happen anymore. I just watched this again this week. I did the 3 most recent ones. I'd seen Ferrari recent enough. I didn't need to do that. But I did this, Public Enemies, and Black Hat again. And I was struck this time, and again, I'm going to be the old man on the soapbox. It's an adult movie. It's people who, can we swear in this podcast?
Absolutely.
It's people who fuck. Like Michael Mann makes movies about people who fuck, and hardly anyone else does that nowadays.
Yeah, and they love to fuck in the shower too. That happens.
Yeah, exactly. twice in this movie. Yeah, it's the most pro-shower sex movie I've ever seen, which is amazing. But anyway, I digress. But I don't really. It's part of the point. It's a movie for adults by an adult. I keep going back to that, and it's not pandering in any way. It's not talking down to you. It's not trying to be a blockbuster. I think people expected this to be like, a big summer blockbuster thing, and it was advertised that way. It was an August release. And so then when it came out, everyone was like, well, that's not traditional summer movie entertainment, so fuck that. It's an art house movie in a lot of ways. It's about mood and tension and shower sex and drugs, and it's about all the things, the intangibles of this world. It's about being in Miami, being sweaty and hot and horny and maybe on some drugs and had a few too many mojitos. It's about vibes. You said it before I could. It's about vibes, and I love that about it. It's not trying too hard to be anything traditionally narrative. And the fact that he got Warner Brothers to pay for a movie that's this weird and crazy and not traditionally narrative, I love it. And I wish there were more filmmakers willing to take risks on movies like this, to take a known property, to take like I think about all the incredibly dull nostalgia reboots we've had over the last few years. Like imagine if Point Break was like this. How cool would that have been? You know what I mean? Like imagine all those, there's so many by the numbers reboots. We're going to take this thing we know you love and give it to you in exactly the same form. We're going to reheat it in a microwave and hand it to you. That is not what he did here. He did not do the 80s Don Johnson Miami Vice. He did something, I'm going to try something completely different. I'm going to hook you in with what you think you know and love and try something new. And I find that ambitious and daring and worth rewarding.
Well said. I don't like Miami. When I visited there, it was like, Miami is not for me.
I love Miami.
Oh, that experience.
Maybe that's the difference, Jim.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm willing to give it some time and revisit this. Maybe take an edible. That sometimes helps.
Yeah.
Again, that might relax me to where I'm like, maybe it's, you're talking about expectations. Perhaps that's exactly what killed it for me in a way. And it was just like, this is not really what I thought it was going to be. And I don't know, if I really like what I'm seeing. But at the same time, like, I have zero qualms with the cinematography and a lot of the stylistic flourishes and things that, like you're talking about, it just like guys hanging out on a boat,
Yeah. People like to say style over substance. My argument is that sometimes the style is the substance.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the case here.
I'll buy that. Ryan, I know you're a fan too.
After Brian was speaking, I was very tempted to just start snapping my fingers in agreement. All of that was spot on with exactly how I feel. And the biggest thing with this for me is Michael Mann has never made like a movie for everybody to like. And I think this is almost the epitome of that. He is making it for a very specific audience, and those that like it love it, and those that don't fucking hate this movie. And that's okay. You're totally allowed to. You are allowed to be wrong. It's fine. But this movie, everything about it is welcoming and crazy and beautiful to stare at. And I don't know. Colin Farrell is just amazing. I've gushed about this movie probably 100 too many times, but this thing is just special. Again, it's like capturing something in a bottle, and he could do something like this again and it would look 10 times different, guaranteed. But the magic of this movie is so great to go back and revisit all these years later. Not enough people have seen this, but the people that see this, not enough people are just ready to ease into Michael Mann's vision. This movie's amazing. Sorry, Jim.
Wow.
It's funny. As I mentioned, I raved about it when it came out, and I think I had only seen it once, maybe 15 years ago after that. So I thought to myself, I know tons of people who hate this movie, and I knew you didn't like it, Jim. So I was like, you talk about the tide having turned on it, like reappraisal, but I also think that there's been a backlash to that reappraisal. Like every time, I'm serious.
Yes.
Every time someone on Twitter is like, I love Miami Vice, people will be like, fuck you, that movie's horrible. And so I put it on this week thinking, I don't know where I'm going to land on this. 10 minutes in, 5 minutes in, I was like, nope, I was right. I was right the first time.
Well, that's just what's crazy is like the beginning and, like I talked about the shootout, I was like, okay, I get it. And then suddenly it just, I don't know, it kind of just dies down or something. I mean,
I get that. It loses some energy.
Yeah.
You're right that the romance is silly. And again, it's not Heat. It's not like, I think Miami Vice suffers a little bit by what people love from Mann. Like you make a movie, he made one of the best cop drama action films of all time. So people went into Miami Vice expecting Heat 2 and got something very different from Heat 2. So
yeah, and I don't mind different. This wasn't my kind of different this time,
sure.
And that's fine. It's mostly like, and I'm surprised I don't hate it. It's just, I guess I wanted more, and maybe, like I said, in the future, it's because sometimes it takes time, it takes age, it takes being in the right place or the right frame of mind. Maybe it means like not going from Heat to Miami Vice, because that's how it happened with me. Who knows?
Right. Although I have a feeling, I hate to be this person, but the age we are, if Miami Vice isn't working for you now, I don't think it's going to click when you're like 70. No. I think your opinion of Miami Vice might be your opinion of Miami, which is fine.
Yeah, no, of course. I don't have to love everything. But interestingly enough, though, my memory of Public Enemies was, that wasn't very good. But much to my surprise, I actually enjoyed it a bit more this time around. I think I brought this up earlier in that when I first saw this, I just thought it was like, oh, I didn't like the look of this at all, and I think that's the number one complaint. To where it's like, oh yeah, it looks too grainy. Why did they shoot it like this to tell this story about John Dillinger? Just didn't kind of like it. Just seemed like the choice didn't complement the era, I guess you could say. But
that's the common complaint.
Yeah,
that's the common.
Yeah, but I watched this on Blu-ray and I'm like, wow, this actually looks pretty good. In my opinion, yeah. And I was mostly engaged by everything. Not sure if I'm that invested in the love story, but for the most part, it's solid, and no one can film a shootout like man. I mean, especially in the woods. My God, I'm sure we could talk about just. Does he just amp up the volume of bullets every single film? It just seems like it to me. Like he just to the point where it's probably in the red when it comes to the sound design.
One note about that, I've found, especially with a lot of modern movies, that they don't amp up the bullets enough. It's like an unrealistic deafening of bullets. And so I think there's a lot of people who have never shot a gun before or been near a gun being shot who have this misunderstanding that they're not as loud as they actually are because they've only ever seen modern movies and TV shows, when in all reality they're fucking terrifyingly loud when you're right up next to them. So I don't know, they're just a little more realistic in my opinion.
Yeah
I agree. It's the kinetic thing that Ryan mentioned earlier too.
Yeah,
like he wants to produce a response through that sound mix. We haven't talked about his use of sound design and the teams he uses for that. His sound mixings are always incredible,
immense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that stood out to me again with this rewatch, and certainly anytime there's a jailbreak or a heist or, like I mentioned, the shootout, I'm just fully on board and engaged. And I think Depp is really good in this movie. I mean,
he is.
Yeah,
he is.
I don't know, Bale, kind of serviceable, but I mean, for the most part, I don't think Marianne Cotillard can do no wrong, in my opinion. I think, but again, I'm not as I want to see what happens to them and care as much about that part of the movie. But no, I mean, I think it was just my memory of this created low expectations. So revisiting it, I was pleasantly surprised that, this is actually pretty good. I don't know why people, outside of just, the choice to film it the way he did, I don't know why people are kind of down on this one. I'm kind of more in the higher, 3.5 star range for this one.
It's the look and, again, the expectations. He's making a movie about a cop and a criminal, so there's going to be automatic heat association, even though it's a different era. And he's got Depp and Bale at the height of their fame, close to it at least. Aren't they both? Isn't Depp coming off Pirates and Bale coming off Dark Knight? I think so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So it was, again, pitched as this massive, big, crowd-pleasing blockbuster before someone finally figured out that Michael Mann doesn't make those. So it's we're going to get real talky and we're going to get a little weird. Although the set pieces in this one are phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Several of the bank robberies and the use of space and the use of location and stuff. Like you said, the shootouts are some of his best. I think this one has his best set pieces outside of Heat.
Yeah, I think you're right. And certainly, again, you mentioned earlier, too, it's a great Chicago film, but it was also filmed in around parts of Northwest Indiana that I'm very familiar with, like Crown Point. So I think it's just cool on that level. And I actually remember when they were in town filming. So
I agree that Bale is kind of a weakness here, but Depp is phenomenal.
Yeah, and there's great,
really good here.
I know I sound like a broken record, but great supporting turns from people who just kind of show up for a scene or two, like Lily Taylor or Giovanni Ribisi, Stephen Lang, Billy Crudup. Yeah, and it's damn solid, I think. So, Ryan, what are your thoughts on Public Enemies?
Public Enemies is good. It is probably mid-tier for me, but doesn't take anything away from it. Definitely oozes a lot of style as well, just like literally every one of his movies. So I sound like a broken record at this point. I'd love to know why so many people hate this. I get the visual aspect, but I feel like there's a lot of people that didn't see this until, I don't know, Netflix or Redbox was pushing this a couple years after this. And by that point, the Depp reputation had started to sink.
Sure.
And I feel like this got swept up in that quite a bit because so many people got away from already. We're starting to get away from the theatrical experience that this just kind of got overlooked around that time by most. And so watching it on Netflix in 2014 or, getting the disc from your local Kmart in 2015 doesn't have the same punch when you could see this at the height of depthness that we all loved in 2009.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
It made me realize what we lost when he went crazy.
Yeah.
Like, he was such a fascinating actor.
Yeah.
I don't want to get the depth stands out on your podcast, so we should probably move on. But anyway, I do miss this depth, sadly.
We can pivot over and talk about his performance in Tusk if you'd like.
Oh.
It's like that for another podcast.
No, I'm still like, I would love to do a Kevin Smith episode. I haven't done one, surprisingly. But
really?
But like, yeah, a part of me is like,
I would do it, but it's gonna get ugly.
I know, right? Like, because like I fear going back to Even Chasing Amy because I loved it when it came out, and I'm like, I don't know about
it's
it.
Problematic but good. That's where I would leave it.
Yeah,
Actually, I think it holds up. But once you get to the Tusk era,
I love Tusk. I will be a sad defender till I die.
Wow.
Depp is the absolutely worst edition of that movie, but the rest of that movie is unhinged and amazing.
Doing what we do for a living, people always ask us our favorite movies. I'm sure you guys get that a lot. And so I always ask that in return. And someone's answer the other day was Tusk. And I was like, that's unbelievable. Like, I was like, I respect, like, you hear things like Jaws and Back to the Future. No one's ever said Tusk is their favorite movie. I was like, that's really impressive. Really impressive.
Well, then I should get them on the Kevin Smith episode then. Holy cow.
Kevin Smith is such a fascinating story, though. Like, I would talk about Kevin Smith, someone who believed their own hype for too long, and then by the time it was too late to really come around, we're going to get to Kevin Smith, people mad at us. Hold on. Maybe we need to move on. Come on. Just cut all this part out.
I could get Kevin Smith to come on the episode, but then I would never talk. It's just
I interviewed Kevin Smith years ago, like Zach and Miri. I swear to God, it was a 45-minute interview where I asked 2 questions.
Wow.
I'm not exaggerating. I'm not lying. I asked 2 questions. He just talked. And it was a great.
Oh, I'm sure. No, I love hearing him talk.
It was a monologue. Like, he just monologued. I asked 2 questions and he went. He's such an unbelievable talker. And I've met Kevin a few times. I like Kevin. We're getting way off track here. I just wish like he could rein in some of his yoga hosers sensibilities later in his career.
Yeah. I'll watch his latest one eventually. I'm curious. I'm sure it's cute.
I will too.
Yeah.
I will too. I've seen them all.
With reservations, but I'll watch it.
Yes.
You know what else I kind of have reservations about? Black Hat.
This is the code section right here. It looks incomplete. He's still writing, but what for?
The guy we're working will take out a city and not think twice about it.
Don't evoke 9/11 on me.
Stay down!
China, now Chicago.
This is only the beginning. Is he political? Any terrorist declaration?
No claim, no statement.
What does he want?
This isn't about money. This isn't about politics.
To you, this is all just a game. A virtual world.
You were never in the game.
Whatever's next is right in there.
Can you crack it?
Wasn't that why you brought me here?
You get discovered, you're dead meat.
But those people do.
Yeah, but you know what? I again, like, I don't know if I entirely care about the plot or the final outcome, right. But everything kind of surrounding it is still interesting just because it's the world of hackers and IT experts. Right. And this is going back to somebody who loves the movie Sneakers and loved it as a kid practically. So you get that just like as this initial setup. I'm like, all right, I'm in. I can get behind this, and keeping with like his kind of like high standards for authenticity, he brings in, technical advisors and consultants and different people to try and make this fully realized and authentic. So I think that's a strength of this story, is just like at least his attention to detail and making sure it all plays out realistically. Again, Chris Hemsworth might be miscast, but he's still a compelling screen presence to where I don't necessarily find him distracting the way most people do. Like Some people just outright go, well, I can't get behind this movie at all because he's the lead and I just don't buy him as a hacker because he has abs, right? But it's just that to me is kind of silly to sort of focus on that one thing and go, well, there's no redeeming qualities, because there are. It's again a pretty just like engaging, solid thriller that starts off a little shaky, but it really does improve as it goes along. Once we get to like the car bomb and the action shootout and the whole shootout that takes place on the street and everything, it's flawed, but I wouldn't say people should outright dismiss this the way they did, especially when it first came out, because I'm in the middle on it, but I'm mostly mixed positive on it. So, Ryan, what do you think of Black Hat?
Another situation where I say the director's cut improves this one quite a bit. This is, once again, not my favorite Michael Mann, but a good one still. The biggest thing I take away from this is just some of the shots in this are like so out of place. They feel like they are destined for a better plot. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because this is not a terrible plot, but God, he's just such an apt filmmaker that he can't help but even take something that is an inferior film for him and make it look amazing. I'm stuck staring at the screen, mouth agape, and always in awe of the stuff that he's able to pull out. Chris Hemsworth doesn't really work for me in much of anything. I don't know that I can even name a couple films that I've truly enjoyed with him in it. But I also like, the smaller character actors, like we've been saying all night. Like the I don't know, the wise decision to put Viola Davis in this is great. He's a master caster. That's something that needs to just be flat out said. He makes great choices there.
Yeah, he cares about the supporting characters just as much.
Always.
Yeah, and John Ortiz shows up
sometimes
again.
More. It feels like.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I agree with that, especially in this case. But no, I remembered, like, there's the subtle changes with the director's. I watched the director's cut for this, and I noticed that like what is it, the nuclear plant? I think you put that.
It's an hour in now.
Yes,
they basically the whole inciting incident changed.
Right.
But there's also just like all these little tweaks that really give the whole thing much more momentum.
Yeah,
Ryan's right. It's a better film. The director's cut is a better film.
Agreed.
It's got way more energy and speed to it, and yeah. No, I think that watching the director's cut helped elevate it a little bit more for me, despite the fact that it kind of plays out predictably and not in a surprising way that I kind of go, oh man, that really took me by surprise. But it's still good. It's still, even just like I mentioned throughout the entire conversation, on a technical level, and like Ryan said, just looking at this movie, I'm kind of just like awestruck just by that particular element. So I enjoy it. I watched the director's cut yesterday. I think it works. Hemsworth is not great, although the Furiosa slander on this podcast will not stand. Hemsworth is great in Furiosa.
Yes.
We're looking for good Hemsworth performances.
For sure.
But his accent is problematic here. It's not exactly great. And I think this movie gets caught a little bit between wanting to be a vibes movie like Miami Vice and wanting to be a thriller like Collateral.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit of both, and therefore not enough of either. Like, it either needs to just be propulsive action thriller kind of thing like Collateral, or give that up entirely and just be about beautiful people on rooftops screwing around like Miami Vice. It kind of has elements of both. It's like he's trying to make both those films at the same time and kind of doesn't really make either of them. Yes. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, especially the director's cut. I think it's just, like I said, Minor Man is still major filmmaking for me, and this is Minor Man.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And again, it's just funny to me when people hate on something or at least dismiss it outright without kind of going, no, there's actually things worth praising about it. You don't have to praise the entire thing if it doesn't work for you, I get. But
well, I think part of the problem with it is it doesn't have a distinct enemy. There is no it's his cop versus criminal aspect, but he tries to put them both into the same character.
Sure.
Like Chris Hemsworth is both the good guy and the bad guy. He's the guy who was behind bars for hacking, but is also now a good guy. And there's no opposite. There's no De Niro character. There's no enemy. The enemy is more the entire broken system, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
The criminal is existential.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit much for a film to tackle, especially a Chris Hemsworth film to tackle.
Yeah, I think most people would agree. And so his most recent work, Ferrari, is another movie I really like overall.
Are we going to circle back to the TV or just skip it? Luck and Tokyo Vice are both worth talking about.
We can definitely touch upon them. I haven't seen them, and yeah, there's something about like I think I've talked about this even with the possibility, and I think it's definitely going to happen next year for Halloween season. We're going to cover Mike Flanagan. And I said,
you can't skip the TV.
I know everybody's telling me that. And I'm like, okay, maybe that should be two parts. Like part one could be the film and the part two could be the TV, you know?
No, because they're intertwined.
Yeah.
Because like the Stephen King adaptations influence Midnight Mass and so on and so forth.
Well,
you just got to do them all together.
Is the same for almost all of them.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's one conjoined filmography. Can't really skip that.
Yeah.
And I would argue Luck and Tokyo Vice are very much a part of the Mann filmography in their own ways.
Well, I'm down to watch them if you want to touch upon them after Ferrari, because I'd be curious to just hear your overall thoughts, especially on Tokyo Vice. It's something that I'm curious about, even despite the lead actor, but that's okay. I won't hold that against him.
Yeah, but the show kind of pushes him aside.
Oh, okay. That's good. Yeah, so Ferrari, I was really overall like kind of mixed positive, and there are a lot of reasons why I think it excels. It similar to what I mentioned with his other approaches to telling a true story with Ali and The Insider. It doesn't attempt to like shoehorn his entire life and career into the span of 2 hours. It focuses on a particular moment in time, and part of me is like, oh man, because my dad was so into cars and racing, I'm watching this going, he would have liked this movie for sure. But it doesn't focus on the cars necessarily at all times. It's got very complicated characters, including Enzo himself being at the focal point. And it really just takes an interesting element of his life, and the fact that like he had had a very complicated relationship with women, and certainly the collapse of a marriage and just his interpersonal life in general. There's a really strong contrast, I'd say, between the performances of the two women here, because Penelope Cruz is phenomenal in this movie.
So good.
On fire. And Shailene Woodley,
biggest Oscar snub of last year, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And Shailene Woodley, not so much.
Not so much.
Yeah, and I think most people agree. And Mann's history of writing women has highs and lows, but I'm happy to report that like this is with the case of Cruz especially, it's definitely high highs for for her portrayal and just fleshing out her character and giving her scenes without Enzo, like even going to the bank and just having to deal with everything. And it's crazy. I didn't even recognize Patrick Dempsey in this at all. Like I didn't know he was in this. Like, oh shit. Because I hadn't seen him look like that before. So once we get to, the final act with the big race and that insane, devastating crash, that's when this movie is like really on fire for me. It's,
the CGI and the crash notwithstanding.
True. True.
Yeah, it looks funky.
Yeah. No, it's beautifully shot, and, capturing just like, the Italian countryside, and certainly just what happens and the horror of things going bad with the cars and stuff like that. I mean, it's definitely imperfect. I'm of two minds with the Adam Driver performance. There are times where I think he's insanely good, and then there are times where I'm like, this is more in the middle for me. Like, I don't think he's bad. I don't think he's great. I think he's just serviceable and does a good job, I guess. But I don't know. A mixed positive once again, and mostly just trying to focus on the strengths, like especially the final act and Penelope Cruz make this movie well worth your time. So those are my thoughts. Ryan, what do you think of Ferrari?
Once again, if you've heard me tonight, you probably understand I'm a big fan of dialogue that's delivered well.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many lines of this movie that just I mean, cut right through you. Like, this is God's way of punishing us. There are so many things that I left thinking, like, this is just freaking classic man dialogue, and I love it all. It was such a grounded, realistic take on conversations, and I know that's a silly thing to praise, but in 2024, it's a big deal. There are so many movies that everything is just delivered through like wasted exposition that doesn't make any sense when you could just show us and say more important things. And I feel like Man still has that. He's still delivering a story that is told not only through visuals, but through dialogue, and they complement each other properly. And I think especially the third act of this film, he does that pretty masterfully.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like I mentioned too, the scenes you're talking about, great dialogue, just when Cruz and Driver are confronting each other, especially towards the end. I mean, it's an incredible moment, like, because it just not only shows their, incompatibility as business partners, but just as husband and wife, and finding that inner, personal dynamic is being very complicated. And yet they're just like, they're so great. They're so great in this movie, especially when they're together.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
And it fits into Man's overall theme of obsession. People getting so involved in something that they lose sight of everything else and everything that's important.
Yeah.
I think it's very much a Man movie.
No, I'd be very curious to see where he goes from here. I know he takes his time and
Heat 2. Heat 2 is in production.
Oh wow! Okay, thank God. Geez, I wonder what that is going to be like. Wow.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm trying to look up where. I mean, I heard they were going to start shooting soon. Last I heard, like they're real close to making this thing a reality.
Wow.
Let's see if there's any updates. Yeah, he's said multiple times that's what he wants to do next.
Well, that could take a while, knowing him.
It could take a while.
Yeah. No, that's fine by me. I'm just, again, like, I think, especially when I do an episode and sort of binge, you really start to pick up on their strengths, but in a way that makes it like thematically rich. And you kind of go, I want to keep going. I want this filmmaker to keep going. And that's the same with if I were to do like a Scorsese Part 3. I know he's getting up there, and I want him to keep going though, right? Because he's Scorsese, and you just want to see what kind of film is he going to make when he's 85. Or it's interesting in the case that everybody's talking about, Juror Number 2, and it being such a standout film for Eastwood now, given his age. And I would completely understand if it was his last movie, obviously, but just keep going, man, if you can.
Man told the LA Times this summer that he plans to start filming Heat 2 either at the end of 24 or the beginning of 25. Let's go.
Hell yeah.
Let's get this thing going.
Fuck yes.
Glenn Powell, baby. Glenn Powell's got to play Val Kilmer's character.
Wow.
Like that feels like fate.
That would be perfect.
I don't know if it's accurate. He's got Austin Butler and
he
Adam
does have
Driver
Austin
listed on
young,
IMDb.
Yeah, and Driver is young Macaulay. That's what I
Whew.
A Butler would work, although Glenn Powell might be more fun. Just take on all the Val Kilmer
It would
roles.
put more butts in seats at this point.
Than Austin Butler? You don't say. Star of the Bike Riders.
Oh, Bike Riders. Oh, Brian, just briefly touch upon the TV stuff, because I'm certainly, especially about Tokyo Vice. I mean,
well, Luck was amazing, and then got canceled because they fucked with the horses.
Mm-hmm.
Like they didn't have enough security or safety on set,
right?
And so it all had to fall apart. But that first season, that only season of Luck, is really phenomenal. Good if you want to check it out on Max. Tokyo Vice has its flaws, but I find it interesting in the Man filmography, or in the Man milieu of like people getting obsessed with things and getting drawn into worlds they don't fully understand. It fits all of those themes, and it's really well made. And then 2 got canceled. So sadly, we're not going to have any more of that. So Man has been unlucky for a couple of projects here now. And now we just have to wait for Heat 2.
Sounds fine. I'm all for it. Yeah. But I think I will catch up with those, especially in light of watching all of his work. It'd be interesting to see. I
recommend Tokyo. I recommend both of them.
Yeah.
Give Tokyo Vice its time to to kind of push Elgort aside a little bit. Some of its supporting characters are way more interesting, and the writers figured that out and kind of center them a little more. Some of the Japanese characters are really well drawn and well written and well performed.
Yeah.
And it's stylish. I mean, Mann only directed the first, maybe, I think just the first one, maybe the first two, but then he produced the whole thing, and it's got the feel of his work.
Great. And I'll see you guys for when the Keep Director's Cut comes out. We'll do a bonus episode on it.
Apparently there's some news out there. I'm going to go to bed like it's Christmas Eve. I'm so excited. I had no idea that there's Keep news bubbling under the surface.
I think this time I'll watch it not late at night when I'm tired, and maybe I'll just watch it over coffee and see if it works for me. It's one of those I'm like,
I'm not even lying. If you said it would cost you $100 to watch the 210-minute version of The Keep right now, I would probably pay that amount of money. So we'll see. I'm excited. It's good news.
So let's give our top 3 Michael Mann films, which we always do at the end of the episode. Ryan, you go first.
Heat, The Insider, Thief. Oh, I thought you say Brian or Ryan. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, you guys sound very similar. It's fine by me.
The Insider, Thief. I'm done. I'm on the record.
Oh, gosh. I'm still staring because I had a list, and I think through the conversation has changed. I'm going to say Heat, Collateral, Thief for me.
And for me, it's Heat, Thief, and The Insider.
Yeah.
Makes complete
Miami
sense.
Vice is fourth. Miami Vice is fourth, Jim, just so you know.
You guys are going to show that at the Chicago Critics Film Festival, aren't you, at some point?
2006, right? Yeah, 20th anniversary. Actually, we are. Although it plays so often nowadays and also we did Thief, and we said we're probably not going to repeat. We did Thief a couple years ago.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and I was there for that, of course. Yeah.
We did Thief on film at midnight.
That was wonderful. Yeah.
I might make an exception and do the 20th for Miami Vice. We can get somebody to come for it. We can get Colin to come for it. And then I would definitely
show a director's cut. That's different.
That's true. Although, again, I think they've done like the quotes I was just saying about Heat 2 were from a Miami Vice screening that Mann was at. I think they screen it a lot because it's one that people want to see in theaters. So we probably won't. The Keep. I will play The Keep 210-minute director's cut twice. I'll open and close with it. You're listening, Michael? Bring that footage, and I will play it.
Oh, wow. Oh, The Keep. Okay, I'll get there eventually. I'll watch it eventually. We'll see what happens.
The Black Hat director's cut has barely played in theaters. I would play that.
Sure.
And I think people would show up for that.
Yeah. No, definitely.
It premiered on FX, of all places. There was like a really random showing one night, and people were like, oh, this is the different cut. Like that was the first time it ever played anywhere. Now it's on a...
I would love if the Music Box would do more of the kind of like director showcases that they did with Lynch and Zemeckis, where they kind of just go all out.
They will, because those did very, very well.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling we'll get more of those.
Yeah, do it for Michael Mann, please. That would be so great to watch all of these on the big screen.
People would show. People would show for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, guys, this was wonderful. I'm glad that you challenged me on Miami Vice. I still don't believe it entirely, but it happens. It's okay to disagree.
Vibes movies work for you or they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a tough time defending. For some reason, Under the Silver Lake comes to mind. Like movies that are very vibe driven instead, or Inherent Vice, vibe driven instead.
Both of those I absolutely love.
Well, but those are movies that are similarly not narratively driven.
True.
Like you got to go with the vibe or you don't go with the vibe. And I have a tough time arguing those with people. It either works for you or it doesn't.
Yeah.
I kind of can't stand the people who claim it's just style, because then I go back on my soapbox of film as a visual medium and style is just as important as plot and shut the fuck up. But that's just me. So like I lose my mind a little bit when people knock it for that reason. But if the style and the vibe doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you.
Seems like every year there's at least one of those movies that's super divisive that people say there was not a lot of substance to. I mean, it always happens.
I usually end up putting those movies in my top 10. Because again, film is a visual medium. Read a book if you want to read characters and story. But I'll leave it there. Enjoy the vibe.
I agree for the most part. It's just once in a while, maybe just the vibes weren't there for me, man. It happens. Yeah. All right, Ryan, can we find more of your work? You're all over the place. I know that much.
Yeah, I have too much to say here. Oh,
you did it again.
Again with the names. Go ahead,
okay, Ryan, you go.
I am everywhere under the Disconnected. If you are anywhere interested with physical media and finding these films on disc, I'm the one that hopefully you can go to. I do a live show every Thursday night going over the announcements for the week, and we have a guest on, and we cover some sort of topic on film after the announcements. And then I actually in 2024 publish a magazine on physical media as well called the Physical Media Advocate. You can find that on Amazon and a bunch of physical media stores all across the U.S. and even one in Canada.
That's cool. Have you checked out the Criterion 4D box set?
I have seen it. I will never purchase it because I have many of the movies in it already.
It's gorgeous. I'm doing a feature on it for the site this week.
Oh, wonderful.
It looks nice.
Yes. And by the site, I'm taking my turn to promote now.
Mm-hmm.
RogerEbert.com, where you can find most of my stuff. I'm managing editor there. I'm doing a lot more TV stuff over at AV Club, including recapping Dune Prophecy right now. And I still do stuff every now and then. I do a lot of streaming guide stuff at Vulture, and I freelance every once in a while for places like the New York Times and a few others.
Yes, everybody follow these two wonderful men and all they do, especially on Letterboxd and now Blue Sky. I no longer have to say Twitter anymore, or X, or whatever the fuck that thing was.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
And yet you still did.
You're right.
Just let it go.
But I'm just going to bleep it out because I don't want to ever hear that. Yeah, I don't want to ever hear it again. And I'm very happy with Blue Sky, as apparently millions are now too, flocking over there. So fine.
I went from 1K to 4K since the election.
Right. Yeah. Everybody just
3,000 followers since the election. It's crazy.
Yeah. No kidding. So the next episode coming around maybe right before Christmas time is going to be on Jackie Chan, which is
sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of delightful surprise. I mean, I know he had a Criterion sort of collection of some of the films he's directed that I'm going to catch up with, and my guest is Sam Inglis, who is a terrific film critic, film writer, and also, he had me on for one of his podcasts, Fearless Pretender, the Jennifer Jason Leigh podcast. So I'm returning the favor, and he chose Jackie Chan. I'm like, well, that'll be fun.
There's a Jennifer Jason Leigh podcast just about how awesome she is.
Yes. Every film is covered
cool.
in order.
Yep.
Yeah. I did the big picture of all things because I wanted to do something completely outside of the Jennifer Jason Leigh wheelhouse that, like, I love her doing comedy. I really do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So between that and like the Hudsucker Proxy, I'm just like, oh man, I just want to see more of that too. But no, it was great. And I'm really looking forward to talking with him about Jackie Chan and seeing a lot of his early work. Because my first experience with him was Rumble in the Bronx. So I need to go back and watch a lot of stuff that I have got to see. So that'll be exciting. So everybody stay tuned for that, along with following my Substack at 5years.substack.com, where I post most of my new reviews and, kind of going back and talking about favorite films and favorite songs and all sorts of fun stuff is there as well. So go follow all that. And I'll include all the social media links in the show notes. Thanks again, Ryan and Brian, for coming on the show to talk Michael Mann. This was a blast. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Yay! We did it!